Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosalind Kratoch-Moore, and I work for DW Academy. And I'm delighted to moderate this crucial discussion on information as aid under siege, future models for financing communication in crisis. Yesterday, we heard very compelling statements, testimonies, and evidence on why access to reliable, trustworthy, and factual information for individuals, communities, and society is vital for democracy to flourish. At DW Academy, we work in over 50 countries promoting media freedom, often in the same context where humanitarian crises unfold. We see daily how funding cuts threaten both independent journalism and humanitarian communication. 10 years after the Grand Bargain promised more resources for local actors and community engagement, we're moving backwards fast. Let me remind us what the Grand Bargain promised. In 2016, major donors and humanitarian organizations committed to getting more resources to people in need through greater participation, localization, and accountability. They pledged to include people receiving aid in making decisions about which affected their lives, and to get as directly as possible to local and national responders. But here's what they didn't explicitly recognize. These commitments are impossible without information infrastructure. You cannot have meaningful participation without two-way communication. You cannot have localization without investing in local media ecosystems. You cannot have accountability without communities having access to information about programs and standards. Information as aid isn't mentioned in the Grand Bargain, but it's foundational to achieving every single commitment. Just as access to information and freedom of expression serve as enabling human rights that unlock and protect other rights, empowering people to participate meaningfully in decisions affecting their lives, hold power to account, and advocate for their fundamental needs and dignity. I want to talk about this today because today is a special day. It is International Human Rights Day, and I think we have to acknowledge today on these rights. Yet, we face a harsh reality. USAID's humanitarian budgets were slashed. European donors are stretched thin. Local media funding has plummeted. And when budgets shrink, communication funding disappears first. Even though, as we've heard yesterday from Jeff in the keynote, access to reliable information can be, or maybe even more important, as vital as food, water, or shelter in a crisis. Today, we'll explore how information truly functions as aid and what financing models can sustain it when traditional funding disappears. So we have three exceptional speakers who bring different but complementary perspectives with us today. I'd like to introduce Marcia Wong next to me, who has over 30 years experience across the US government and international organizations, most recently at USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. So you can tell us firsthand what that was like. And you're now a senior advisor to the Private Sector Humanitarian Alliance and is also a CDAC board member. And we welcome Marcia. Next to Marcia, we have Dr. Elke Löbel, who heads the BMZ, which is Germany's Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. She heads a directorate on crisis management and crisis prevention. And she's been coordinating Germany's crisis response work with since 2015. Welcome, Dr. Elke Löbel. And on the end, we have Lina Chawaf, who has sustained independent media for over 30 years, and she founded a Syrian exile media radio station, Rosanna Radio, for displaced Syrian communities, and is currently a Nieman Fellow and a visiting researcher at Harvard. Our goal today is practical. It's to move beyond the problem, to look more at concrete financing models and pathways for sustainability. And let's start by understanding the reality we're facing. And so I wanted to ask each of you to share how the crisis in this new world order that we've been hearing about this morning, how that's affecting your work and the communities you serve. And so, Marcia, I would like to start with you. You've recently taken this new role with the Private Sector for Humanitarian Alliance, focusing on mobilising private sector resources for humanitarian response. But as said, you were also inside the system. So you were in USAID during these recent budget cuts. From your perspective, why does communication funding often disappear first when budgets shrink? And how does this challenge intersect with efforts to bring the private sector investment?
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank all of you for attending today. And as a CDAC trustee, I think I am compelled to say, you better go back and fill out those boards back there. I'm taking names. So please, for Safe AI, we want your feedback. Thank you also. I have a feeling everyone in this room was affected and probably still feeling the effects of severe and dramatic foreign assistance cuts globally. Regrettably, the US was the first one to really bring this to bear. And when my former agency, and it's hard to say that, 83% of its funding, when you're the biggest donor in the world, both development and humanitarian, that has real life-saving and life-altering consequences. So I appreciate your resilience in coming today to find the solutions. If I can just start this question with a really quick example about communications. The administration, I had already left government at that point, but the new administration decided, okay, we'll do waivers for life-saving emergency food aid. Punto. We had to go in using different ways to influence political leadership that it's not just food, it's clean water to cook the food in, it's medical interventions, it's shelter. Those are also life-saving. But what's interesting for us, if we're in the world of communications, what also wasn't preserved in that first round, life-saving or early warning systems, flash floods, famine early warning systems. Those were cut without even a blink of the eye. Again, outside pressure, I was talking to US Congress and to many of you perhaps to say, these are life-saving. They have consequences when you have no information to prevent loss of life and loss of infrastructure. Being able to make the life-saving and the cost-saving arguments, manage to get funding restored. So communications, why is it cut first? First of all, political leadership, if I may not understand simply the significance of communications. There's an educational and influencing and pressure process that needs to take place, if I may. Second, stating the obvious, a political agenda. When the US cut back on democracy promotion, media training, anti-corruption, rule of law trainings, it was deliberate, it was meant to be provocative. So there's a political agenda that I know every one of us every day is still trying to correct. And third, and for some donors, and I'm going to look at my colleague here to correct me on it, but for some donors, some funders, philanthropists, communications funding, what's the metric? How do I quantify that? Is it behavior change? Well, how do you quantify that? So the narrative and explaining that is important. The private sector role. Very happy to take on this new position with the Private Sector Humanitarian Alliance, a group of corporations, along with OCHA, International Chamber of Commerce, and others. We're intent to mobilize smarter and a more collaborative way, resources, in-kind, technical assistance to humanitarian crisis. Why would they be interested in communications and information flow? Well, I say, you're a private sector, you also care about performance, accountability, tangible impact. If you don't have a communication flow, then you don't know what you're doing. So we hope to support local organizations that have built into their work that community two-way flow, because without it, you never really are getting the correct measure. The quick other thing I would just add, because I know many of us are trying to figure out how to stay sustainable and to survive, partner up. Find how your work supports humanitarian development, peace building work streams, and partner up. I'll get to a little bit more about when I talk about the World Bank. Thank you.
Yeah, we will come to that. Thank you. Moving over to Elke. So we are seeing dramatic shortages, humanitarian funding globally, meaning tough priorities must be set. You're working on that at the VMZ. How is this affecting German programs? Can you tell us if there have been any changes in structure, priorities?
Yeah, perhaps to start, first of all, for me, it's very interesting to be here. I'm not a media specialist, but I'm working in development cooperation for almost 30 years, and I've been working with NGOs also before I entered the ministry. So what you can expect from my side is that have a very practical view on what is going on. And I've been to Syria, for example, 10 days ago. So when I travel and when I see our programming, I bring back information. This makes us change our work. So at the moment, I must confess that we also have questions. It's not that we already have all the answers in the development ministry. But to start perhaps while reading your papers for preparation, I really appreciate that you are talking about systemic challenges. I really appreciate this because it's not only about money. And we have to understand this, all of us, and we have to react on it. And what I heard in the last presentation of UNESCO, thank you so much for mentioning democracy at risk. It's a systemic challenge we have. So the answer cannot only be more investing. It has to be to invest better and to cooperate much more. Coming to my ministry, perhaps, what we see, for example, that our partners are really struck by less money. Let's talk about World Food Program. Let's talk about UNHCR. I'm in charge of the World Food Program. I've been in the board, and within the board before Marcia, we worked together on the nexus there. So we know each other and we know the challenges very well. World Food Program had to release 6,000 people, staff. UNHCR 30%, and they also close their offices. So what happens to us? How do we refocus? We ask, first of all, we ask ourselves, how can we, by cutting, for example, staff in local areas, can we still strengthen localization? Can we do that at developer? Is participation at risk if we have less people working on the ground? So this is what we are discussing with them. And we do have strategic dialogue, for example, last week with UNHCR and with World Food Program 2 weeks ago, together with the Foreign Ministry. So we're discussing this. We have these questions. Is participation at risk? Are partners cutting the reporting? Very important. Do we get the information we got before? Or are we lacking information? So is the data still available? Perhaps we do not even recognize that data is not coming. So these are the questions we are working on. What we did in the last years is that we worked a lot on building bridges between different actors, because I see still a silo between humanitarian aid and development. So what we did is we elaborated by using our practical lessons learned in the field and elaborating instruments like transitional development assistance and the special initiative to support refugees in protracted crisis, because refugees stay in the regions for decades. We know that it's not a short-term problem. So we are working on this, and we are elaborating new visions of how we can foster this challenge of less money and more needs. And perhaps there we elaborate on durable solutions. And this also integrates, of course, communication and data and so on, because we have to know that the development budgets cannot compensate all the shrinking humanitarian budgets. That's true. And I think the challenge is that we have to intensify our cooperation. We have to understand each other in a much deeper way. And as I said at the beginning, the challenge is to see it in a systemic way. If data is lacking, who is suffering by less data, and what are the consequences? So breaking the silos, Marcia, we have been working on that for times, for years. For example, in the refugee context is something we are working on. Just to give one example, so you know what I'm talking about. We have a refugee camp in Ethiopia. We are working with UNHCR and UNICEF for 10 years with this refugee camp. What did we do? We stopped water trucking, cars that come and bring the water, trucks that bring waters to the refugee camp, and we started 6-7 years ago to work with the municipality and create different ways of connecting the municipality with the refugee camp. We could reduce the cost of water in the refugee camp from $9 per cubic meter to $1 per cubic meter by doing this. And of course, the communication was essential because the refugees stated as one of their main needs that they don't have water and that they cannot even pay for the water, and UNHCR had to pay for the water, the refugee UN organization. So this is one example how the needs of the people, communicating their needs, knowing what are their main problems is a big challenge, and that we can be more efficient if we partner, if we work together. And it's not about a humanitarian or a development problem, it's a joint challenge to systemically work on the new situation we are working on. And the last sentence, it's not only about money, again, it's about democracy, it's about principles, it's about how do we build up a new world under the circumstances we are working in.
Thank you. Moving on to the media side and kind of going to the other side, you talked about talking and building partnerships and working with communities. So, Lina, the Syrian media and displacement response has been significantly dependent on or supported by international funding organizations like USAID. How have these cuts affected organizations like Rosanna Radio that you set up? And what does this funding retreat mean for editorial independence?
Yes, I will start from my experience, Rosanna. I have been in Rosanna just like to know exactly what I have been doing. I have been funding this radio from exile for 12 years. So we start in 2013. And of course, it's year by year, it become very difficult. Like it's really challenging. In the beginning, it was easier to find funding for it, but it's becoming so challenging. So I remember in 2018, one of main donors like CIDA through IMS, International Media Support, they told me like, you cannot keep depending on us 85%. It's dangerous. And this was for me a light to run and try to bring and devise many other resources for donors and for funding. And since this time, I was able really to run and make it 52% after 2 years. But for the USAID, I want to talk really about USAID. It was very difficult for Rosanna to bring money from USA. While there is many other media like Aleppo Today, like radio, many radio, and like they were able to bring the USAID. And then before Trump came back to the presidency, like 4 or 5 months, I was able to sign first funding with USA. And I was so happy, you know, in Rosanna, we are so happy that finally we got, after 10 years, we were able to get the USAID. And then Trump came and like in the middle of our contract, in the middle of our project, USAID cut. So half of our budget stopped directly. And in a day and a night, they do it like this. It's always, so they said no money more. For us, like the USAID as Rosanna, it was 8% only from our budget. So it affects us but not so much. But for a television like Aleppo Today, they had 90% from USAID. So for them, they closed. They totally closed. And not only Aleppo Today, there is many other media in Syria closed. And this, especially after Assad fall, the landscape of the media, Syrian media, it's changing totally. So it's really affecting the media. And according to the editorial independency, the problem that when we as journalists and media, when we have to run after many sources, sometimes you have to run about specific projects. Like the funding is for specific, for example, talking about hate speech or solidarity with the journalists. So sometimes it affects the everyday your content production, and this is. But the big problem now, it's if this make the media really even lost the vision and the value. Because when you run, sometimes you lost your your direction. So it's very important to be able to keep our vision. And we in Rosa, we have been always saying, no matter what the funding, we will never, at least we have to keep our value and vision, and we have to always aware each other that no one, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
Okay, it's a very sobering kind of picture that you just painted, especially in the Syrian context. Innovation isn't really optional anymore. Things have to evolve. And you said you saw that yourself when IMS came and said to you this, you have to diversify and you have to look at other ways, and then you evolved. We're now looking at survival for everyone. And I'm really interested to know what's working despite these cuts. And so you started touching on it now, Lina, and I think it's really interesting to know. And so, Marcia, I'd be interested to hear from you. In your new role, you're exploring how the private sector can support humanitarian responses and what kind of resources they can bring in, and how can we make the case that accurate information and responsible communication are not just nice to have, but also integral to effective humanitarian investment, and kind of what innovative financing models could protect information as aid, or kind of finding discretionary funding? What options are out there?
That was an easy one. Thank you. First of all, on the private sector side, and many of you may already be aware or need to be aware and to be more intentional with working with the private sector. First, within even the private sector humanitarian alliance, there are a number of corporations who their business is connectivity and information systems. And so when a crisis breaks out unilaterally, but we want them to be more collaborative now, they'll provide in-kind and technical assistance. And think of it this way, if somebody's providing me in-kind assistance or manpower and expertise, that is a dollar or euro or pound or rupee or whatever less that I need to spend. So that is money you can move to some other needed work stream within your organization. Vodafone, the Infosys, they are ready to send in communications equipment pack ready into places that have lost connectivity. Infosys, in discussion with them the other day, digital education. The question is driving it more towards those who need it and making sure they, again, are listening to what the real needs are. So working with local organizations to make sure communication is flowing towards the private sector. And so they're informed. And that's really, information is decision-making content. Without that, I'm making poor decisions. So here's a little bit of lean comfortably into that world of performance metrics, outcomes, the business side of the brain has to come to fore perhaps when speaking with private sector. But also let's bring to bear the world of the international financial institutions. And I know many of them may be supporting. I was just looking at the African Development Bank. They're doing extraordinary work with developing media across Africa. We need to push harder on those doors. And I want I'm going to refer to my notes because I want to make sure I get it right, because I told him, I'm going to mention your initiative. I'm going to make sure this entire room runs at you hard now. So in the World Bank is no different than private sector, perhaps, in that impact, cost effectiveness, output, performance metrics sings the same thing to the private sector as it does to an IFI, as it should to all of us, actually, because it reflects maybe our workforce desire to do well with the resources and their time spent. The consumers of these products want to know that the products are being useful and responsible in certain areas. And then there's the stakeholders. There are donor states who contribute to the IFIs. So I want you to put some eyes on CIVIC, the Civil Society and Social Innovation Alliance. It is built on a decade's worth of civic engagement at the World Bank. Now has been retitled, relaunched in April. Global program, multi-donor trust fund to support CSOs with grants and technical assistance and knowledge sharing. Under its platform, digital engagement platform. This is to explore the responsible use of digital tools and AI to advance citizen engagement and to make sure that the bank itself is accessible to the communities that its programs may be in. The other thing I want you to put some eyes on is the Civic AI Collaborative. Again, it's trying to show how AI-powered systems can help communities bring their voices back into the bank, especially in the grievance system. So eyes on both those things. What my colleague there, I'm going to say his name out now, Ali Ramin, also advised, and this is something I would encourage you to think about. Invest in the work streams. So you may be, I'm in communications, I'm in community-based engagement. Tie it to within the bank and within the private sector and within other donors. How does your work in communication support health intervention? How does it support education in crisis? How does it support protection of women and girls during displacement? Tie your information to ongoing work streams and partner up because I think that's one way of preserving resilience funding. Thank you.
Okay, and so then going to the other side, which would be the media, and going to Rosanna. So you already were kind of protected a little bit because you had diversified before the crisis, but you have been experimenting with many different kind of models, and I don't know if it's a private partnership has been one of them, but can you tell us, Lina, a little bit about your experience with other business models for Rosanna and how you have and what you've tried and what's worked?
Yeah, actually, I talked about the cut and the like diverse of sources of funding, and this is demand that we create a new business model, and this is what we have been doing in not only with Rosanna, with all the Syrian media sector. So, for example, we try to go to the digital media, like if we can earn money, but this is not working, especially with the Syrian content. It was blocking, you know, by under the Caesar section. So this is part. Going to advertising doesn't work with a conflict country. It's very difficult, not only for Syria, because I have like even experience in Yemen, in Sudan, in Libya. So in conflict country, you cannot do advertising. We try to diverse. We go to many, and what we actually really did spread the project budget to the core budget. I mean, building the project budget as is core budget to be able to produce everyday content in Rosanna. So this was some of it. We try to go to crowdfunding, like for example, digital crowdfunding. It was so difficult for, again, in conflict country is not the same symbol like for like a country who stable, and so it was like not easy to bring a new business model. But in the last 2 years, we tried to collaborate with humanitarian and civil society organization. This was a new model. And even the civil society organization and the humanitarian NGO, they were not able to understand what does mean. When I was approach them and say we have to collaborate, just for many things, like for not only for income, just to have us. I was telling them, have us as a tool accountability for your work, and use us as this. And at the same time, it's, you know, it's the sharing. They can use us to be an accountable tools, and we can be more on the ground with them, not only in media, and be more credible and have wider impact. I have been working on this new business model since 2 years. I was able to do 2 projects with a big organization, humanitarian, for mental health, awesome. And we have been doing with GIZ to 1 project called Taboo. It was a very good project, and we worked with many civil society organizations working for women on the ground. So it make it more impact. It's a lot of money for us, but at least we are more visible. They are more, as a civil society organization, they are more, as I said, visible to by their activity. So it was very successful, and I'm trying to really continue with this, because I think it's humanitarian and media, if they collaborate together, it will give something more impact and give more information, access to information for the audience and for the people.
Thank you, Lina. So moving on from there, where we look at this kind of connection between the different communities or sectors coming together, this is something that from a DW Academy perspective, sustainable communication infrastructure is an essential commodity in all of these areas. And so we see information can save lives, we talked about it, and we see it competing for those funding. Right? So we see it competing for food security, shelter, health, and we talked about it a little bit in the first round. From the BMZ's perspective, Elke, where do you see the relevance of information as aid?
I would like to react also on what Marcia and Lina said. First of all, I would underline what Marcia said about World Bank and the danger of losing ground on what we all, since 2000, I don't know whether you remember that, but there was a World Bank report, the World Bank Development Report, Voices of the Poor. And it was clear we then started, and I'm not looking back to say in the former times it was better. No, I'm telling you that it took us 25 years to build up that we really listen to the voices of the poor, and that we are still not yet there to always have them on the table. So why am I mentioning that? Marcia, as you said, information is key for every policy decisions. And from the ministry side, I can absolutely underline that. We are using information out of our programming for our policy shaping in fragile contexts. So we feed it directly back into new approaches, and I already mentioned 2 of them, the transitional assistance and our special initiative on displaced persons. But there is the fear that with the changes within the multilateral system, and this is not only because of less financing, that there is a flashback, and that we go back to situations where we only look at one part of the reality. For example, we have to save lives now. And saying that, we forget about the systemic approach that we need all the others present there. So I would like to underline what Marcia said in this sense, and we are still working on that. And I would also like to give an example. With our special initiative on refugees and host communities, we work on social cohesion with the people, because this is part of our integral security approach. If, for example, refugees and host communities do not talk to each other, and know from each other and get the information that the water for the refugees does also support the municipality and the host community because, for example, German Development Corporation is financing both. If we don't make understandable at the community level that it's an approach that brings together all of them, we will lose these people and we will have less social cohesion and we will have less security and more crisis. So I want to really say we need information and we need to talk to the local leaders and let them build up a system that gives the necessary information to all of them, all of those who need it. And to react on you, I think, thank you so much for stating how difficult it is to build up this trust with the people, with the civil society. And I, as Development Corporation person, as I said, we work on the nexus between humanitarian and development. I think trust needs time and presence. And this is what Development Cooperation can bring into this. And if we support capacity building for people who do media, who do have local radios and so on, we can have a part in it. Perhaps talking about how we do this, I know there's not so much time, so I cannot explain in detail what we are doing, but we are working in Kakuma camp in Kenya, for example, with Deutsche Welle. But we do not only work on the information issue, we also work with IFC, which is private sector support, on solar energy, because if you want to listen to a radio, you need energy, and so you need solar in Kakuma camp or Kakuma region. So we are supporting this. And again, we have to see it in a more systemic way and not only from one part of the reality. Just to state shortly, we do support in Tanzania radio stations. We do support in Bangladesh to have social cohesion between refugees and the communities. And we do this together with Deutsche Welle, but also with German civil society institutions who understand that trust and time is important to build up a community that is able to communicate its own vision to the public.
Okay, thank you, Elke, because you've naturally transitioned us into the systemic focus that we want to have in this conversation. And the reality is that these USAID cuts, they're not temporary. And they signal a broader retreat, and they signal international engagement and a kind of new world order of sorts that we're seeing. And you already started answering this question for me, which was how do we fund kind of systems that survive these political changes and these budget cycles, and how do we go beyond the money? And what would these resilient kind of communication funding cycles and this kind of setup look like? And you already began, but maybe if you can just answer this one a little bit more, and then I'll move to Marcia with the same question. If you,
first of all, you have to accept that resilience is necessary. And I think this is a challenge for the humanitarians. I've been to the World Food Programme board 2 weeks ago, and there's always this discussion, if we do more resilience, do we have less humanitarian? No, we have to start together from the beginning. And if partners ask for more resilient structures, we have to help them. And if communities say, we need the life saving, but we also need a structure to build up our own leadership, to build up a vision, how we want to live and how we want to reach these objectives, then we have to support them. So this is one point. Resilience is an issue that we have to start to think about and to implement from the beginning. If we are humanitarians or developers, doesn't matter. We have to work together and think together. This would be one point. Then, looking at Syria, for example, we have been, during the Assad regime, we have been present in Syria for 14 years, though bilateral cooperation has been stopped. But we do have specific instruments that even if there's no government we can work with. We can work with the UN, we can work with NGOs, so we can build up the resilience, and we can also work on communication. And so after 14 years, we are now going back to Syria, and we don't start from zero. We have some structures there where we can talk to community leaders, where UNDP, for example, worked in Aleppo, and we shortly talked about it. They worked on assessments. What do we have to do for reconstruction now? And they do not start with zero. And there was one example I would like to mention. There is a TV broadcast in Syria, in Aleppo, and he has been to Turkey the whole time. And now he's coming back and he has no financing. And this is, of course, to have a private TV broadcasting. It's not my decision to give money to him as a ministry, but we can support him together with other actors to work with the Chamber of Commerce and think about in how far the reconstruction of Aleppo, and I must say I was surprised by Aleppo. There are so strong Syrian civil society and actors who really can build up now Syria, that they work together and think about a communication system where surely we with UN and NGO will be able to support. But the first step has to come out of their society, elaborating a vision, and you even know the person I'm talking about. So this is resilience. We have to start resilience right now and not start with, let's do first a little bit of humanitarian, give life saving, and the rest will come in 3 years. No, we should not do that.
It's very powerful. Marcia, do you have something to add?
Thank you.
Oh, no.
Absolutely, just nodding my head to everything Elke is saying, and to underline Lina's point about the diversification. I know it feels a little bit of stating the obvious, but I'm going to do it nonetheless, because this conversation is bringing me back a little bit to when I was in government and was in a bureau which at the moment had the most humanitarian assistance of an agency that had the most development funding in the world at that time. And my staff would kind of grimace when I would do this to them, but it was like, I would lean into every conversation when we were talking about budget cycles and say, make our money, make money. And we're all busy, and the donor, we had so much money, we're responding. There was a little degree, complacency is too strong a word, because I think they recognize what I was saying, but time, labor, it's hard to do innovative finance. It's hard to create different models, but did we not bear that responsibility? So if anybody lets me back in government one day, I'm going to say that again. But yes, again, become more comfortable and financially literate. Resilience communications funding cannot be of one flavor. It's not fair to look at traditional donors to be the sole source. The USAID may be contracting, but we see it globally. So how do you, when you get maybe a grant from a traditional donor, how can the traditional donor plus yourself go to another philanthropist, a private sector, and say, I have this grant, can you match it? Let's scale, let's replicate, I'm credible. BMZ believes in me, I'm credible, let's go. So we have to be more comfortable in that world of innovative finance, blending it, remittances. If I can talk about the diaspora who are looking at opportunities like Syria, how do we bring ourselves in front of the diaspora communities in a more collaborative, constructive way to bring their resources in also? So I think there are ways to get at it. One size won't fit all. Be creative and be agile.
Thank you. It was very, very powerful. And I think time is running, and I forgot to welcome the online participants, so I apologize. But I would like to move to the audience, to all of you, to questions and answers. There are some microphones roaming about. And so, yes, I would like to put up your hand. Please introduce yourself and to your organization you represent, and keep your questions brief. Oh, lots of hands.
Hello, I already introduced myself yesterday, but for those that were not present, so Asiteli from Global South Studies Center, University of Cologne. Very important panel, definitely. I was wondering whether information as aid is under siege just because it's been organized and governed from the top, very hierarchical since the beginning. So just off the top of my head, but also, you know, worth exploring, and want to definitely pick your heads on it in terms of maybe treating information as common need and cooperative resource from now on, just because, you know, the resilience we actually have to develop is the type of resilience that has to be just common need, basically, and has to speak globally. So to me, information as aid is not a concept that we have to somehow accept and go on with. So I'd just like to hear you on that note. Thank you.
Was there something specific you would like, or can just you can take it? Or who would like to take this?
I can say something about this because I think about it yesterday a lot. Information as aid. If we consider information as aid, like food and medicine and legal support, it will be make all the community that displaced not be away from global attention and have access to information, find their like everyday need. So I think this is the big problem, that when we talk to the donor and when we say, they always see media like very little according to the humanitarian. So if we talk about project 5 million for humanitarian, then for the media 50,000. It's, you know, this is literacy, by the way. If we worked with even the humanitarian, because they don't know how important the media is. So they have to like consider it as not, it's a big part of it. It's a big part.
I would like to react a little bit and also provocative. Provocative. For me, it sounds a little bit like, let's try that with this slogan, we're going to get more money. I just put it on the table here. And I think this will not work, because at the same time, and I think your papers are very clear in that and very good, you stating that the local people should take the decision. And I think there is a controversy in this. If you want to make information in the whole resilience and aid sector more relevant, you have to let the people speak who are on the ground. They themselves have to decide that in their living right now, information and media is an important issue. So what we need there, and there you already have information as aid as an issue, you need capacity building, you need leadership training, and then these people, they themselves will ask for more support on communicating, on social cohesion, on peace, on mediation, and that. So I'm very provocative here right now. But if we always ask for more localization, I think NGOs and media should not ask for, we want to be part of the aid system, but they should really elaborate how they can get more connected to these local voices. And I state this very provocative because I think there's innovation in it.
Just very quickly, if I can add one thing. The proximity to communities and making sure that the integrity and the genuine nature of that dialogue, information needs to flow both ways. I am afraid, I know you probably talked about it at length yesterday, communication is a public good. Make sure it's not communication coming to me by Claude or by Grok or by ChatGPT. So there is going to be a challenge in front of all of us to make sure that the communication that's flowing is genuine, can be verified, and it displays a proximity to community. And I think that is going to be a challenge.
Okay.
Hello, Lamia from CPJ, and thank you for this very, very interesting panel session. I would like to underline a comment of my Belarus colleague, journalist colleague from Belarus, who recently visited our office in New York and said a very strong quote that I would love to say it here, that USAID cut off did what Lukashenko couldn't do for the Belarus international media for the past 30 years. So I wanted to underline what kind of crisis it created in that part of the world we are mostly coming from. As far as I understand from what Elke said, that how the federal ministry is extended its help so far to exiled Syrian media that's tending to return to the country, to Syria, after such a long time. And my question would be specific: that does it, how does it affect to Syrian exiled media in Germany, and how do you think it might affect or adjust the German refugee policy, if there is any link? Thank you.
I'm not sure whether I got the question at the end very right, but I just can state, first of all, as I said, we are questioning, we have a lot of questions right now in the situation that funds are cut. So we look at participation, localization, and so on. So we are very close looking at that. And with specifically on media, we do have stakeholders we are discussing, with which we are discussing about media in Syria. We do have, for example, a diaspora platform where everybody, Syrian people, can contribute, and we are elaborating new ideas of cooperation. And for example, Marcia mentioned remittances. So we try to support the self-organization of diaspora here in Germany and Syrians who would like to contribute to reconstruction. And this is in the health sector. We work with doctors, for example. We do have clinic partnerships. And if Syrian media people here in Germany have ideas to cooperate and coordinate, we are willing to discuss this and looking for chances to support them. This is one point. And the second point, when I would like to talk a little bit about what I experienced in Syria. When I talked to this TV broadcasting person, and he said, I want to come back to Syria, but it's so difficult. And I gave him the feedback, okay, and Marcia touched upon that. He has to present in how far he will support the democratic reconstruction of his country and to find trustful partners, be it the donor, perhaps the EU or whoever, but he has to build it up in his community. So we would not support him if there is not a strong leadership of the community supporting his channel. And this is what you said. And then he has to build up trust. So I don't know whether I answered your question, but this is the way we are thinking about it. If there is trust in the society, in a certain group, a community, Aleppo governorate, and so on, and he can build up somehow, I'm sure we can support with in different areas, connecting to NGOs, connecting to Deutsche Welle, whatever. But this is the first step. It has to come bottom up and will not go top down.
Okay, we have one more question from the audience, and then we have to wrap up.
Okay, last question before lunch, always daunting. But my question, I think, is primarily to Marcia. And I wonder if you could talk about how different financing models shape power and incentives, especially as we move towards the private sector and philanthropies. I think we've all read the recent reporting on Oracle and the Tony Blair Institute and how accessing different financing models could shape work, right? That may be a particularly egregious example, but I'm curious to see from your work how you see different financiers, how they shape power and incentive models on the work that's being done.
Thank you. Complex question. We'll take it over lunch too. I think I alluded to a little bit speaking with the private sector. You know, in my work currently, I am speaking very much primarily to the corporate social responsibility, the social impact side, but we're all aware that there's half a brain also on the business side, the .org and the .com. And so again, I think as you are working perhaps with private sector, always be aware of that. And I'm not asking you to be tricky. I'm not asking you to be disingenuous or unprincipled, but if you can also make a business argument for why communication is important, that helps them make their own internal case, actually. So there's narrative, there's lexicon, stick with your objectives and stick with those principles, but there's ways that we can weave that a bit better. I think there's a recognition that a lot of these highly financed institutions, Green Climate Fund, the World Bank, and others, they're sitting on a lot of resources, and there's been a lot of pressure from donors. And again, USAID was one of them, applying a lot of pressure to them that and we too, the USAID was a huge bureaucracy, as Lina's experience, but money has to move faster. There's an urgency here. So what is in the way of the money moving faster? Reporting requirements, accreditation that takes 2 years. There was a lot of pressure being placed on these institutions. Some of it stuck. The Green Climate Fund is setting up a much more fast channel of consortium-based funding. Again, partner up, please. It makes it regrettably easier for some of these financial institutions to look at consortia versus individuals. So make it easier for them to provide you resources too. I don't want that pressure to stop. All of you have real voice individually, but much more when you're together. So let's lean into the consequences. If you don't fund communication, there are life-altering and life-saving consequences. That's a humanitarian case. There's a development case to that. There's also the business case. If you don't fund good communication, then how do you know any of your investments or any of your CSR is really having the impact that you thought it did? So be bold in outlining the consequences of lack of communication funding. Thank you.
Okay, we need to end with concrete commitments. It's been fantastic in terms of analysis and the insights, but I want to take us all back to the call to action. And so I want to ask each of you for one recommendation for the board in the back of the room that we should consider include into this call to action. Lina, please.
Again, like information as aid, if we consider it like food, medicine, like legal support, then we will not leave the community and the audience and the people, make them vulnerable. It's make them more stronger. And as much as we power our audience, we get power as media and civil society organization.
I have more than one point because I read all the papers, and one recommendation, and it's getting deeper during our discussion here, is please go on with systemic approach. Have a closer look to all the others who are around and who have the same objective as you as media people have. This would be my first one, and this needs to create more partnerships and bridging the gap between humanitarian development, private sector, talk to each other, find out how this way forward is a joint way. Third point, more co-creation on local level with community leaders, more co-creation. And I think this will make you able to convince more people about what you really, your objectives are. Co-creation with those people in situations like in Syria or wherever. And last point, please, be strong in countering the ideas of not working on gender in media, which is going around the world. I'm very, very unhappy with that, and I'm really preoccupied on the gender issue. So please, this is my plea to you.
Thank you for that. Starting off the conversation, being introduced as a CDAC trustee, I have to end the conversation as a CDAC trustee. How do you know that I'm even up here on the stage? How do you know that my remarks were not written by Claude or by Grok or whoever? You don't. But I did write these myself. But the important thing is that AI is all around us, and it is ahead of us, and we need to catch up. And the local communities are exercising it, being impacted by it, need all our eyes as they are also discovering it. So Safe AI, you'll hear more about it, I'm sure, during the day, and you heard about it yesterday. I would like to look at those who can help enforce its embrace and adoption, traditional donor, those who will be feeling the effect of it, the demand, the training, and the tools needed to understand how AI would implicate them. Please signal your support for Safe AI. If you're an organization that can train, support it, great. If you're on the receiving end, again, be loud and what the consequences are when AI is being used irresponsibly. And that is not what we want. Thank you.
So thank you to all of the panelists. It's been really an engaging discussion, especially around this critical challenge. And please continue these conversations over lunch. And please add to the call to action board at the back of the room, please, all of you. And I'm looking forward to this afternoon where we will dig deeper into trust and AI. So thank you very much.